Got some more breaking news for you on this afternoon. New details of how the president's allies stopped people from talking in the days before the election. The biggest bombshell this hour, another possible payoff to bury unflattering stories about then candidate Trump. Once again involving the National Enquirer, allegedly paying $30,000 to catch and kill a salacious story from this former doorman of one of Trump's buildings here in New York. That doorman had said after the Enquirer bought his story that he was told it would never run. AMI is the parent company of the magazine. They categorically deny that Trump had anything to do with his decision to yank the story. And our CNN national political reporter, MJ Lee, is back here with me on set because the doorman speaks.
The doorman speaks, and I don't know if we have the full statement. I just want to read it out loud.
Yep.
The doorman says, "Today I awoke to learn that a confidential agreement that I had with AMI, the National Enquirer, with regard to a story about President Trump was leaked to the press. I can confirm that while working at Trump World Tower, I was instructed not to criticize President Trump's former housekeeper due to a prior relationship she had with President Trump, which produced a child." So now we are learning from the doorman some details about what he was allegedly trying to claim in his interview with AMI. And we have some interesting reporting from my colleague Sonia Mogi, a little more about just the agreement and what the ramifications for this doorman are. A source who is in touch with both AMI and this doorman says that according to the agreement, he can speak about the story itself. So the story being that Donald Trump had this love child, but what he cannot do is speak about the agreement with AMI and any money that he may have received as a part of that agreement. Now, I think we really need to be emphatic here that CNN has not verified whether there is any truth to the story that this doorman was trying to sell. And also worth noting that Ronan Farrow, who wrote the article in the New Yorker, he has called the story salacious and unconfirmed. So a lot of sort of red flags pointing to the story that he is trying to tell. And of course, AMI itself is saying that they were not able to verify that there was any truth to the story. In the statement that they released earlier today, they were very emphatic that they did not find this to be a credible story, and that is why they killed it and didn't run it.
But again, just quickly, why it's significant, the through line through this story and other stories is this MO, this pattern of Trump and people in his orbit with these, potentially damaging stories, true or not, paying them off to keep them quiet.
Right. I mean, if three makes a pattern, we have three. We have this Trump doorman, we have Karen McDougal, the former Playboy model, and we, of course, have Stormy Daniels.
Right.
All of them sort of different versions of agreements and payoffs and, this effort to try to keep them quiet, but all of them are now wanting to speak out, and they all say that they were paid so that they wouldn't tell their stories leading up to the 2016 election.
MJ, thank you so much. More breaking news, President Trump TV. Meantime, we have all kinds of new details about how Trump allies stopped people from talking in the days before the presidential election. The biggest bombshell thus far this hour is another possible payoff to bury unflattering stories about then candidate Donald Trump. It once again involved the National Enquirer allegedly paying out some $30,000 to catch and kill this salacious story from a former doorman at one of Trump's buildings. That doorman says after the Enquirer bought his story, he was told it would never run. AMI, that's the parent company of the National Enquirer, they categorically deny that Trump had a thing to do with its decision to yank the story. So with me on this is CNN national political reporter MJ Lee, and let's just walk it back for a second. What did the report suggest?
So this appears to be one more story, one more example in which there was an effort to pay to kill a potentially damaging story about Donald Trump. Now, the Associated Press and the New Yorker are reporting about this incident in 2015, where they paid $30,000 to one of the doormen at one of the Trump buildings who claim to have a very salacious story about Donald Trump. Now, what is this story? The story is that he claims that Donald Trump had a secret child with one of his former employees at the Trump organization. Now, I want to be very emphatic that CNN has not independently confirmed whether this transaction with AMI happened. We have not confirmed whether there's any truth to what this doorman is claiming. But I will say a very important angle in all of this is David Pecker, the man who is the publisher at AMI. We know that he is a very big supporter of Donald Trump. We know that he's very close with Donald Trump, and he's viewed as someone who would have an incentive to help kill a damaging story about someone who is running for president. Now, he is currently denying that all of this took place, that this intention to kill this story existed. I want to read a part of his statement, or a statement rather, from AMI. It says, AMI categorically denies that Donald Trump or Michael Cohen had anything to do with its decision not to pursue a story about a love child that it determined was not credible. The suggestion that David Pecker has ever used company funds to shut down this or any investigation is not true. So again, categorically denying that this catch and kill happened.
Okay. Let me keep you here and have a broader conversation with me now, CNN political director David Chalian and white-collar criminal defense attorney Sarah Azari. And so, David Chalian, just first to you, starting to connect some dots. We were sitting here this time yesterday talking about that initial report saying that the investigators wanted to raid Michael Cohen's, hotel, home, office, right, because they wanted records related to Access Hollywood. Before that, there was Stormy Daniels, Karen McDougal, and now the Doorman. Shall we call this a pattern?
Yeah, we shall. I mean, it is a pattern. And here's why I find it so fascinating, and why I think Michael Cohen may find himself more exposed to potential legal jeopardy, even though he's conducting the same behavior he apparently has conducted for Donald Trump for years. He says it himself. Just go to his own words. He takes actions to protect Donald Trump. That's what he does. It's one thing to do that when Donald Trump is the CEO of the Trump organization. It is another thing when Donald Trump changes the context of that by becoming a presidential candidate for the U.S. presidency. And maybe the behaviors that Michael Cohen employed to protect Donald Trump, as he says, at times in the private sector, all of a sudden run into campaign finance violations, potentially, in the context of doing those very same things to try to protect Donald Trump when he's a presidential candidate.
Okay, so Sarah, so he mentioned potential campaign finance violations. I mean, let's start on the micro level, which is you have these investigators and they're, scrounging through whatever they can find on Cohen related to these issues. They're looking for bank records. They want to see if there are any kind of connected finances between Cohen, maybe Trump, maybe his buddy David Pecker. What are they looking for?
Look, the campaign finance violations are the small part of this. I think the bigger picture is a whole slew of other crimes. Bank fraud, wire fraud, possibly tax fraud, and then a conspiracy, because you've got different people involved here, which is Michael Cohen, who seems to be the common denominator, and the communications he had with Trump and possibly other aides, in the Trump campaign. And so when you're dealing with these multiple players, to the extent that there is a crime that occurred, this becomes a conspiracy case. So there's a charge of conspiracy, and then that's followed by a conspiracy to, commit X, Y, and Z. So I think ultimately, if in fact the campaign finance violations occurred, that's going to be just a small part of this. And the bigger part of this, and what Cohen could face a lot of time for, is the bigger crimes here.
Which is, to take it the step further from the micro to the macro, this was the Southern District of New York, right? And so it could come back potentially with Mueller, because depending on what they find on Cohen, they could dangle this, hey buddy, you may be going to prison for a long time unless you flip on Trump.
Absolutely. And by the way, during the course of this investigation, if evidence of other crimes are discovered, they're not to turn a blind eye. They're to go ahead with prosecuting those crimes. So there's a lot going on here, and this is just just the beginning of a big deal.
MJ, I mean, Michael Cohen, there have been quotes from him on, I would take a bullet for Trump, I would jump out of a window for Trump. I mean, yes, he would know where the proverbial bodies are buried, but what's to say he would even flip?
Right. I mean, Donald Trump is a man who we know is obsessed with the idea of loyalty. And I think we potentially are going to see that tested with Michael Cohen, who is a longtime friend, a longtime attorney, and who has been so loyal to Donald Trump that he claims these payments, some of these agreements, he executed them out of loyalty to Donald Trump because he cared about his friendship with Donald Trump, and not even in his capacity as a lawyer. And keep in mind that just a few days ago, he had this very upsetting experience of the FBI agents coming into his hotel room, going to his office, and raiding these spaces, and his family is watching this as well, right? So he has his family to consider. He has probably huge legal bills that he is now having to pay. So at some point you wonder, this man who knows everything and anything about Donald Trump, if he has any skeletons in the closet, Michael Cohen would be the man to know. Is that pressure just too much?
David Chalian, if I can just go back over to you, and we'll get into some of the politics of this in a second, and Republicans and Rod Rosenstein, but I'm just curious, what's your biggest question on all of this?
My biggest question is just where you ended with MJ, which is it's a two-way loyalty street, right? So we've seen these public displays of Donald Trump having dinner at Mar-a-Lago with Michael Cohen right now. How long does that public display of connectedness continue? MJ is totally right. Michael Cohen is experiencing the glare of the spotlight and the pressure of that in ways he's never experienced before. I am looking for any signals on either side. If President Trump thinks he's getting nervous that Michael Cohen might flip, does he end sort of the loyalty from his side of the equation as well? Any cracks in that relationship, which lately has been very public on display as we're still a team together, is going to change this story dramatically.
Okay, we're going to leave it there. David, thank you, and Sarah and MJ, appreciate both of you ladies as well.